Welcome guys! Today I'm going to show you how to do a watercolor landscape duo. We're going to do one side as a mountainscape, the other side as a cityscape. Now hopefully you're noticing how my colors work together. Take a second and let's review what is that word. What is the relationship between these two colors? Hopefully you got this correct. These are complementary colors. Blue is complementary to orange. So we're going to focus on these two complementary colors, and we're also going to work on creating landscapes or these layers using different values of our color. This video can be watched all at once, or you can always stop, pause, follow the step, and follow along as you need to. Feel free to take multiple days to do this. You always want your layers to dry in between each application of paint, so take your time. This video is here to help you guide you when you need it. Okay, so to start off our painting, first thing we want to do is to mask out our edges. Now you notice I've already taped my paper onto my board just so it doesn't wiggle around during filming. You can tape before or after this step. I want to create two frames in my paper, both of equal sizes. So I'm going to need my ruler, I'm going to need a pencil. So what I want to do is I want to measure in 1 inch from the edge. Remember when you're measuring, some rulers might be like mine where the 0 starts on the edge, but many rulers have a little space before the 0. So make sure you're lining up your 0 with the edge of the paper. Come into 1 inch and make a little mark. Now you want to do this in the top and on the bottom. Reason why we do this is so that way I know for a fact when I line these 2 points up, it is going to be straight. If I just did one line or one little mark that I measured, there's no guarantee it'll be straight. I might end up making a super crooked line and I don't want that. So always measure with 2 marks. Now you also want to make sure that your lines are nice and light. Remember, watercolor paper, it's really easy to go too dark with your pencil, so barely touch the pencil to the paper, and we're going to cover up our lines with our tape anyways. So I'm going to do this on all 4 edges. So I line up with the edge of the paper, 1 inch in, make a mark. Second point, edge of the paper, 1 inch in, make a mark. Now I've already made all my marks around the paper, so I'm just going to take a second and connect all of these. Another really good trick is how to hold your ruler. Oops, didn't quite finish that line there. So if I line up my 2 marks here and here, you might notice that if I hold my ruler in one spot, if I push too hard, the ruler itself will move. And I don't want that. So when you line up your 2 points, a really good trick is to put your hand in the middle, spread your fingers wide. This will help make it so no matter where I push, I'm holding the ruler down and it's not going to move. Alright, so I have my 4 edges, but I wanted to make 2 frames on this paper. So I need to split this in half. So I'm going to measure my paper. As we see, it is 12 inches long, the half middle is 6. So I want a 1 inch gap between my 2 sections. That means if the middle is at 6, I want to make a mark at 5.5 and a mark at 6.5. These are where my 2 lines are going to be. That'll give me a 1 inch gap in between. I've already done that on the top and bottom, so I'm going to connect those lines. Again, nice and light. Spread your fingers wide so the ruler doesn't move. I'm not doing a line in the middle. That was just kind of for reference for me. So you see I have 2 sections drawn out. I want to take a moment, take my tape, and I want to tape these edges. Since pencil's really hard to erase with watercolor on top of it, I'm actually going to make sure that my tape covers it up just a little bit, so that way when I take the tape off, I can just erase my pencil and it's no longer there. marks showing through, take a minute and try to erase it now, because as I said, the watercolor does not like to let you erase pencil from underneath it. Make sure it's all cleaned off. Alright, our paper is set. So for this project, we are going to be using 3 different brushes. We're going to be using a flat brush, which is kind of long and rectangular, sometimes more square. A rounded brush, this is more like that traditional one that we use a lot. And at the end, we're going to use a small round for our little detail work. So 3 different brushes. Now for the palette, I'm using a pan set of watercolors. This is my personal set at home, so it's got a lot more colors than you guys have at school. But don't worry, I promise I'm only going to use those basic primary and secondary colors just like you have, so that way you can see it exactly the same. But this is the pan that I'm using. Now a lot of times you'll notice the lids get really dirty. Always take a second and clean out your lid at the very beginning of your project before you get to work. So I just take a paper towel, get it wet with some clean water, and clean yourself out a little area so that way you have places to mix your paint. So now I have some nice clean places to work. I can mix my paint without worrying about old colors getting mixed in there. Alright. I don't have to worry about doing the whole thing, just one little bit works fine. And my palette's going to be off screen so you don't see it. Other things you're going to want, a cup of water, and you're also going to want a paper towel. Now mine just got really dirty from that, so I'm probably going to get myself a new one. I like to fold my towel in half, maybe even more, and then kind of tuck it underneath my water cup. This just makes it so it's all set up nice and easy. So as we've talked, this project is going to be 2 paintings that work together. One of them is going to be a landscape with hills and mountains going down. The other side is going to be a cityscape, so it's going to have a bunch of buildings. Now I've shown you lots of pictures, so we've seen pictures as a class of the different mountains and different cities. These are in your Google documents in Google Classroom, so you're welcome to take a look at them, or just Google search mountainscape, landscape, or cityscape. Now there are a couple things we want to really pay attention to. Let's just pull 2 of them out. Now remember our vocabulary word, atmospheric perspective. This picture is a great example of that. We see how the mountains that are farther away are a lot lighter than the ones that are closer. Our paintings are going to replicate that. The back is going to be very light, front's going to be really dark. We're also going to do that with our cityscapes as well. The buildings farther back will be lighter, the buildings closer to us will be darker. So if we think to our color wheel that we practiced, complementary colors are directly across from each other. Red to green, blue to orange, purple to yellow. Same thing with our tertiary colors. Red, orange, blue, green, yellow, green to blue, red, purple, and so on and so forth. Just whatever color is directly across. Complementary colors are great because they make each other pop. I want you to pick a pair of complementary colors. One landscape's going to be in one color, the other cityscape's going to be in the other complementary. I do want you to keep in mind you have to create lots of different values. So if I had to create a lot of values of yellow, it might be kind of hard. I would recommend probably not doing yellow or purple for that complementary pair, just because it's harder to make lots of different shades and tints of yellow. It is possible though. If you are looking for a challenge, go for it, try yellow. If you want a simpler color, I would stick with our classic pairs, red and green or blue and orange, because those colors are already in your paints ready to go. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, pick a tertiary color combination. You're going to have to mix those up yourself, so that might give you a little bit more challenge for it. So pick out your color pair and let's get started. I'm going to choose orange and blue for mine. Keep it a little bit simpler, orange and blue. So let's start with our mountains. You gotta decide which one's going to be which color. I think I'm gonna make my mountains blue and my city orange. I feel like the cities are always alive, and yellow and orange are more lively colors, so we'll stick with orange for our cities, blue for our mountains. I want to start by mixing my lightest color first. So I'm going to take my round brush, get it nice and wet, and I like to get lots of water in my mixing place first. I'm just kind of scooping the water out of my cup, placing it on the lid. This way I know I have plenty of water to work with. I'll mix enough paint, that way I won't have to stop and make more later. You never want to get stuck not having enough paint. That's the worst thing you can do. Now, let's grab my color. So with watercolors, the more you swirl, the brighter the color. So I'm going to make sure my color is nice and hydrated. Starting with my blue, I scoop it out and mix it into the water. I might even add a bit more water to that, make it a bit lighter. Remember, our first layer that we're painting is our background, so it's going to be super light. With watercolors, you want to add more water to make a lighter color. Less water, more pigment, the darker color. So with the landscape, remember you can do any type of mountains you want. Just remember to look at these examples and notice that none of them are perfect little triangles. Mountains are very organic, they're a bit more random. Make it different, make it interesting. I'm going to start towards the top of my paper, not all the way at the very top, but pretty high up. And I'm going to start by making my basic little line of that first mountainscape. Add some more paint, and I'm just slowly working my way across the page. You could start at one point and end higher up, that is no problem. I want to pull my colors down. If you notice your color is a bit light, I can just add more water onto my brush and even mix it on the paper. And I want to pull this color down to create that layer. Just adding some water, mixing it, keeping it nice and light. Make sure you take your paint all the way over to the edge of the paper, both sides, all the way to that tape. That'll give us that nice crisp line later. Now you notice I don't have puddles of paint on my paper. It's filling the area in nicely. There are no puddles. I'm just going through trying to make sure it's all the same value because this side's a little lighter, so I'm just kind of mixing it up a little. Pulling that paint down. And you notice I only went down like an inch on this side and 2 inches over here. I don't have to do the whole paper. Just one little bit works just fine because we're going to cover it up with our next mountain a little later on. Alright, so once you like that, I'm going to lighten up the bottom. Just kind of feathering out the bottom a bit, making it nice and light. That's just some clean water, mixing it in. That kind of fades it out a little bit, makes it easier to put the next layer on later. Now I want to let this dry. You've got to be patient with this project. If I try to put my next layer in right now, the color's going to bleed and mix all over the paper, and I wouldn't get that nice mountains. So that's the perk to doing two paintings at once. While this one's drying, I can work on this one. So I'm going to rinse out my color, blot it off. Now for the city, we want to use the flat brush. The flat one is nice because since city buildings are so geometric, the flat brush can create that shape really easily. Okay, so we're going to do the same process with mixing our paint, but this time I'm going to do orange for this side.
Nice big pile of water first. It takes a minute, but it's worth it, so you don't have to make it later. Nice big pile of water. Alright, let me grab my orange. Activate that color by swirling on it, and nothing's left.
So for the city, I'm going to keep my brush very flat. And I'm just going to be pulling down my different buildings. I want to start kind of the same height, give or take. Maybe I want to just start with a tall, rectangular shaped building. Just pulling it kind of straight down. Maybe I'm going to have a shorter one over here. And that fills the space. Now I'm going to go over a bit. Maybe there'll be a thin one. It's going to go a bit taller. This one will be kind of pointed at the top. Pull that out there. And maybe there'll be a taller building there. Maybe let's do a stepped up building. So I'll start with a rectangle. A bit wider. Now I'm going to go a bit smaller coming up. Smaller from there. And I'm going to turn my brush and get a nice little spire on top of that building. I'm going to go have a low edge here. And I want another building in that, so let's maybe have one come that high. It's going off the paper. Don't be afraid of having some buildings, some mountains go off the edge. You don't have to see all of it. We're going to be layering up so many different buildings and mountains. I'll cover that page great. Add a little water, and just kind of feather out the bottom a bit so I don't get a harsh line. Make sure it's all filled in nicely. No puddles of paint. Go. Rinse your brush, wipe on the side, blot on a paper towel. Now I need to let this dry. When it's dry, I'm going to come back and do my next layer. Alright, so this first layer is dry. A great way to check to see if it's dry is to touch your painting with the back of your hand. Always want to use the back, not the front. Front tends to leave marks if the paper is still wet. Back's a little softer. Your painting should not be cold. If it's slightly cold, that means it's still wet. If it's hard to tell, feel the regular paper, compare it to where the paint is. If they're about the same temperature, that's a great way to check and know if you're good. You could also try touching the bottom of it. Since it's going to be covered anyways, they are both nice and dry. So, I'm going to add my second layer in for the mountain. I want to make this color of blue a little bit darker now. So I've already got less water because I've used some of it, but I want to add a little bit more pigment. So I want to mix in a little bit more blue. Don't want to overdo it. Mix it in. It's always a good idea to have some scrap paper so you can check your color to see what works.
So I can check it on a scrap piece of paper and say, okay, it's just a little bit darker. I could add a little bit more color if I wanted, but I don't want to do too much. I want these to stack up nice with each other. Maybe even slowly. A little bit at a time, make it like way easier. That should work. There we go.
So I'm going to continue this process for both the mountains and the city. So I'm going to go down a little farther, and I want to make this mountain range different than the first one. Don't let it be an exact mirror. You want them to be different. You have a valley here. Maybe this one's a bit lumpier. Sure. Pull that paint down. Fill that space. And a brush. Put a big mountain on this one. Why not? Now you notice this mountain is triangular, yes, but it's not a perfect triangle. Don't let there be any perfect triangles. Mountains don't look like that, or at least really, really rarely. You know what? I think I want to go a bit higher, because it got a bit light here before that mountain. So I think I'm going to make this mountain a little less extreme. And I'll come over, paint my brush. Let's kind of smooth it out a little. Now my color did end up being kind of a big jump between this first layer and the next one. So if you notice that happening, just a little bit of water, and just kind of spread it and mix it in. Make sure you're getting all the way to your edges. That'll help lighten it up. Just don't forget to take it all the way to the edges. If you don't, it's going to leave a darker ring around it, and we don't want it. See, it's starting to happen right here. So just like last time, adding a little extra water to the bottom. And kind of feather it out a bit. There we go. That layer's done. Rinse my brush, wipe, pat. Landscape, we switch back to the flat brush. Or Cityscape, sorry. Cityscape, switch to the flat brush. Same thing. I want to add a little bit more pigment to this. Nice and little bit of brush. Mix it in. So with this Cityscape, you're going to notice your buildings are going to overlap a lot. That's good. We want that to happen. So if we look at our pictures of the cities, you see the buildings overlapping each other all over the place. You have taller ones in front of shorter ones. Your city's going to have lots of overlap. So maybe I'm going to say I want my buildings to end by at least there. Sometimes I give myself kind of a little starting point. Let's do a taller one right here. And he's going to go over. It's going to be kind of wide. Really make sure that your buildings have flat edges. Nice and horizontal and vertical. You don't want any buildings looking like they're falling over. That would be fun. Maybe let's do notice it's covering up some of the ones behind it. That's fine. Real cities have lots of layers of buildings. Now I don't want to see a little halo of the building behind it, that little lighter bit. So I want to make sure I take my brush and scrub it just a little bit, just to make sure those two layers blend together. Same thing as right here. Yeah, right now it's all very flat across the bottom, so maybe I'll pull up a little there. Maybe let's put a taller building behind this one. You can do that, you can layer it up. As before, let's kind of feather out that bottom. Just a wet brush. Blend it down. This makes adding that next layer all a bit easier. Now I see a little light spot ended up there. So I want to come back, grab my color, make sure that stays nice and dark. Should be a nice solid wash across the entire thing. I don't want to have some dark areas, some light. So go back and fix them if you need to. Just make sure you don't leave any puddles. If you see a puddle forming, take a paper towel and blot it up. Alright, I'm going to let this layer dry and I'm going to continue on this process all the way down. I'm going to speed this up so that way you're not watching the entire thing. Come back to you at the very end to show you how to finish this. So as you can see, the entire thing is painted. I've gone all the way down to the bottom with my darkest color, so I've swirled the most in my pigment for those. You might have noticed in the video I had a little bit of issues. I had to redo this layer once just because I could see the water blending out, so we had two different colors. I did have a little bit of colors blending out over here because the layer before was still a little wet. No problem, I just covered it up with another building in front of it. It's no big deal. So at this point you can take off the tape and you are all done. So for those of you who want a little extra challenge, you could do something like this, where I put in the shades to create a little bit more detail in the foreground. Keep watching if you want to do this little extra bit to your project. It's not required, but it adds an awesome touch.